Welcome to Tales from the Fandom, a podcast that brings a special guest out of the multiverse and straight to you. And now your host, David Ginsburg.
Hey everybody, welcome to the latest episode of Tales from the Fandom. I am happy to have you along for the ride. We have a great guest today, Lisa Ayanami, who is not only a cosplayer, but she has her own podcast called I Love That Movie. So definitely go check it out after you're done listening to her episode. Next week, we wrap up January with Lainey Hobbs of True Crime Fan Club and the All Just Pretending podcast. So make sure to stick around for that episode. And then February, we've got a great lineup ready. Just come to the Facebook page at Tales from the Fandom, or find our discussion group at the Fandom of Tales from the Fandom on Facebook, and you will be able to see what's coming up in February, and maybe even a sneak peek into March as well. I'm going through recordings now in January, bulking up the episodes for hopefully the rest of the spring and into early summer, and getting ready for the launch of Tales from the Five Nations, which is a Savage Worlds game system set in the Eberron D&D world. I'm looking forward to getting that out, and you will be seeing notices about that as it gets closer to the release date. I'm hoping to have it out by the end of January, so definitely give it a listen when that comes out if you like actual play podcasts. And now you'll get to hear a short promo from a different podcast, because I love to support other people's podcasts. And then after that, you'll hear with the discussion with Lisa and I. So thank you so much for tuning in, and have a great day.
Welcome to Film Roast.
Hey everyone, Hannah here, the co-host of Film Roast, where two overcaffeinated and underqualified friends talk about all things movies. If you like film factoids, lots of sarcasm, and bad impressions, check us out on iTunes, Google Play, and Stitcher. You can also follow us on Twitter at Film Roast Show, and like us on Facebook, facebook.com/filmroast. Happy roasting!
And welcome to another episode of Tales from the Fandom, and I am excited to be recording with another guest from the great state of Texas. I've had so many wonderful Texas guests on, and I just have to say that I'm excited to have this next guest on. Her name is Lisa, although you might know her online as Ayanami Lisa. She is a cosplayer and podcaster, and she has a number of great fandoms that we are going to talk about today. Welcome to the podcast, Lisa.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to kind of dive into all these different topics, and yeah, just really excited.
Yeah, it's so exciting because I tell this story occasionally. Like, I never used Instagram before the podcast, and it was a great way to find people that were interested in different fandoms initially. And what's funny is, like, I'll be looking at like past guests, like Pocket Cosplayer, Ali, or Koholint from the Cosmic Coterie. They're a big Sailor Moon fan group, and at some point you had posted maybe a comment on their thing, and I saw like, oh, like, here's this person that does a podcast about movies, but wait, she's also a cosplayer that dresses as an incredible Batgirl. And I think, like, I followed you and I listened to some of your podcast episodes, and now I finally have you, and that's so awesome.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Yeah, I think Instagram and Twitter are where I've made a lot of really positive connections with people. It's just, I don't know, for some reason, both those interfaces are just really great for that. I agree.
It is, especially like with Twitter, because I was always kind of like anti-Twitter until, again, started the podcast and connected with all these people that either do their own podcast or they listen, or you know, it's just an incredible back and forth that you have. It's just, it's changed my outlook on some of the stuff, but of course, then if you read too much of maybe comments or go down that rabbit hole, then it's like, okay, no bad, turned it off.
Yeah, exactly. I think, you know, for me, there's some fandoms that not everybody in my life shares. So Twitter is a really good outlet. I can go on there and talk about any fandom that I want to discuss, and somebody out there is excited to chat back with me. And so that has led to a lot of good connections and guests on my podcast too.
Absolutely. Now, you have the podcast and you're a cosplayer, and we've got a bunch of different fandoms. We've narrowed it down off recording to a few, and one of the ones that I always enjoy talking about is Harry Potter, because like I got into Harry Potter late, like when I was in college. I think only the first 3 books were out at the time. So therefore I'm now dating myself as to how old I am. But what's incredible is that now my kids finally, they're 9 and 8, are finally reading the books, and I even had to buy another version of or another copy of Sorcerer's Stone so they would stop fighting over them.
Aww.
And because my daughter has read up to the point of the Sorting Hat, so I signed her up for Pottermore, and she got sorted, which made her brother jealous. But he couldn't read the book because she's reading the book, so I had to get another copy of the book, and now he's going to read it, and then he can get sorted.
That is so cute.
But you are into Harry Potter. How did you get into it? Was it childhood? You know, you grew up in the Harry Potter generation, or was it something that you came across later, like after the books had come out or the movies?
So I'm going to date myself and say when I read the first book, and I think it was pretty soon after it came out, I was babysitting a child, and that was the book he wanted me to read to him when he was going to bed. I think I was 16 or 17. So I'm kind of just a little bit older than the characters are. So I guess in a way I grew up with them. To me, I felt much older, but looking back on it, 12 and 16 is really only 4 years. But yeah, I read that book. I saw the first movie in theaters, and then I ended up watching a lot of the movies, and I actually convinced my father to watch them. I thought that he would really enjoy them, and I introduced them to him, and he went crazy. He watched all the movies, he started reading all the books, and his enthusiasm for the fandom made me want to go back and read all the books. So I've read all of them, and I love the movies, and yeah, I just I think that they're so good that I haven't really found anything to replace them. Like, I don't know if you felt this way, but after I read the last book, it really was like saying goodbye to old friends. And I had such a connection with all the characters, and I haven't really been able to replace that, at least with a book series.
You know, I felt the same way, and it was like that for a while. However, I will say that there is a book series that comes very close to giving you that connection to the characters and a multitude of characters. And that's the Percy Jackson series by Rick Riordan.
Oh, really? I haven't read that.
Yeah, there are. There's a set of 5. The initial Percy Jackson series is a set of 5 books, and then it continues in another set of 5 books, and then there's kind of like offshoot books that have like some of the side characters or other different characters. Because I don't want to spoil it, but there's like a 10-book set, and you get about, I'd say, like 9 or 10 primary characters that you really connect to, but the first 5 books are all about like Percy Jackson, and then 2 or 3 other characters, very similar. It's always like a trio of characters doing something, but that's the book. And again, I think Percy, he starts out at 11 or 12 when the book series starts, so it's very similar. Again, you're growing up with the character as you're reading it. But I love that book series as something that comes close to similar to magic, but more of they're like demigods. And that's
okay.
Like, that's the closest thing I've come across as something akin to Harry Potter. However, I will preface that by saying, do not watch the movies. They are utter trash.
I think that's kind of what's kept me from diving into that fandom. I definitely saw the parallels, I mean, even just from the cover art, but that's good to know that the books are really good. The movies just aren't. Okay.
Yeah, they did 2 movies, and it's even on like the writer's website. He's like, oh yeah, you know, they bought the movies from me, but I have no involvement in them at all. Like, they just, it's almost, you see elements from the book, but it's not close to the book, and you're like, it's just not good. But
okay,
books are good. I will if off after we finish up. I'll talk to you about more about Percy Jackson.
Okay.
But with Harry Potter, do you like the books more, or since you watched the movies first, are you more of like a movie fan, or are you just all encompassing? I'll take you'll take what you get.
I mean, we'll talk about it a little bit later, but my first love is movies. And I will say that I'm pretty forgiving when a movie deviates from the book, because I truly believe, since it's such a different medium, I mean, in books you have pages and pages and pages to really get to know and flesh out your characters and the plot, whereas a movie is usually 2 hours or 2.5 hours. So in that sense, I think I enjoy both pretty equally. I like it all, and I'm fine with the changes that they made in the movies. Maybe there's a couple things here and there I wish were a little different, but I think overall they did such a great job with those movies. I don't really have any complaints.
Right. And for me, I know that like I love the books, but with Freeform having apparently a Harry Potter marathon every weekend for I guess until the end of time, I get to see those movies so more. It's easier to just be like, okay, hey, look, the movie's on. I can sit down, turn it on. The kids are fine watching it. And it's like, yeah, okay, cool. I can watch it. And I don't have to spend a few hours, diving into the book and just making time for that. Like I can go do other stuff and have the movie on and listen to it.
For sure.
Now, which Harry Potter movie is your favorite?
Oh, that's kind of tough. I think it's sort of a tie. I tend to like the movies that had, I guess, a little bit more of a darker tone. I'm partial to the ones that stick to the main plot, and every movie does to a certain extent, but my favorite ones, probably just from a movie standpoint, Prisoner of Azkaban, I think is the best movie. Just because of that director. I think it's Alphonse Cuarón.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. And I love his work, and I just think he almost like elevated it. I mean, it stands on its own as a complete movie. I mean, it's part of the series, and it definitely connects to them, but I just think that movie was the best movie. And then I think after that, probably the last two movies are kind of a toss-up for me. I just like the conclusion of the story. I think it's wrapped up really well, and I love getting to see that on screen.
Yeah, I tend to, apparently, whenever I sit down with like that Freeform marathon, I'm like always catching Deathly Hallows 1 or 2, and I'm totally fine like just watching those, because I really like how they laid it out, that they cut it, how they did it, like everything about it was just really fun. I know like my favorite book of the series is Prisoner of Azkaban, but I think my favorite movies is either Order of the Phoenix or Deathly Hallows. And Order of the Phoenix really is partially due to like I love Luna Lovegood.
Oh yeah, she's awesome.
One of my favorite characters, so it's just nice to see her around.
Yes. I can totally understand that.
Who is your favorite Harry Potter character?
So it probably is Snape. I think I tend to like characters that are, somewhat anti-hero and are a little bit more complicated. And I always had a good feeling about him when I was reading the books and watching the movie. I just always felt that he was misunderstood. And then when you get that really satisfying explanation about, how he got to where he is and what his motivations are, I don't know, he was my favorite character.
Okay. That's totally reasonable, because I know that there's a lot of, everybody has their favorites. Like mine is Neville.
Oh, I love Neville too, don't get me wrong.
Yeah, like Neville's my guy, like from the first time I read the books. And I was all about Neville. I was like, there's something about Neville, and just seeing him evolve. Snape is definitely one of those characters where a lot of people have very strong feelings one way or the other. I try not to get into it as far as like fandom, like. There's always like fandom wars about things, and it's usually it's like Snape and Dumbledore like are the two that seem to catch it. Like people either love them or they hate them for what they did to Harry, like as as you know, as the story progressed, and you're like it revealed itself to them. But yeah, Snape's a good choice. Snape's got a lot of stuff going on for him.
He does, and I like Neville too. I think that that's probably, when we were talking about like the differences between the movies and the books, I do feel that's one thing that I wish was in the movies more, was Neville and just how important he is. But at the same time, I understand why he's not in it as much. But it's like if I had a wish list, one or two things I could change, that would probably be one of them. So.
If I had a wish list, it would be a book that focuses on Hogwarts during the 7th year with Neville and Ginny and that crew, you know, trying to survive that 7th year while Harry, Ron, and Hermione are looking for the Horcruxes. Because I'd love to see what was happening inside that castle.
I love that. I haven't heard that before. I really like that.
That's what I would want.
That's cool.
You know, I can't see it happening with all the Fantastic Beasts stuff that's happening and everything else, but
sure,
one day, fan fiction,
right? You can. There's fan fiction out there. I guarantee it if you look for it.
As with, if you've heard some of the people that have been on here before, anytime I talk Harry Potter, I like to ask, "What house are you?"
Oh, it's Slytherin. I was the only person in my friends group to get Slytherin, and it's kind of funny because I told you my dad's a big fan too, and I texted him and told him, and he was like, yes, we're both Slytherin, yes. Like, we were just like excited about it.
I have to say, I have done 100+ episodes at this point, and I don't talk Harry Potter with everybody. However, those that I've done, you are officially, as we record this, on October 26th, you are my 3rd Slytherin.
Wow. See, I'm always curious, like, all my friends got Ravenclaw and Gryffindor, and I'm like, am I evil? Like, how did I end up with Slytherin? And they were all like, I can see it. Thanks a lot, guys.
Well, what do you think qualifies you as a Slytherin, as far as, like, what do you see in yourself that matches up with that?
Man, that's a good question. I mean, all I can say, I don't know, maybe I don't have the self-awareness to pick out in my personality exactly what makes me Slytherin, but I will say that I sympathize or like those characters more in the show, or in the movies, in the books. I don't have really big anger towards Drake, the Malfoys. I find the Death Eater stuff really interesting. So, you know, not that I think that their motivations were good, but I think that they're some of the more interesting characters. And so maybe it comes from that. I don't know.
I know that the two people that I've talked to previously that identified as Slytherin, they said it was more like that ambitious, like the ambitiousness for themselves, and like they strove to be great regardless of, like, you know, sometimes not what they had to do, but they just did what needed to be done so they could accomplish their goals mostly. But that's cool. I can now add you to the ranks of Slytherin house
yes.
for the podcast. So,
and not all Slytherins are bad. So just throw that out there. Some of them are heroes.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
And that was something that was going around too. I'm part of like this really big Harry Potter like fandom community, and they love to post like these memes and these like Reddits and stuff. And one of the things that they referenced back to was in Goblet of Fire, they had said, wouldn't it have been interesting and possibly even better if the Hogwarts champion, instead of Cedric Diggory, had been the Slytherin who had entered, and then if the Slytherin had been killed instead of Cedric, it could have turned some of the Slytherins to like, let me take a look at what's happening in this world. And you know, my parents are Death Eaters, but maybe that's not such a good thing. Like, I mean,
right.
They just killed our Slytherin friend here, and it was an interesting read that, you know, how it could have progressed to the point of, okay, Battle of Hogwarts, some of those Slytherins could have stayed and fought instead of being expelled to the dungeon or whatever.
Right. And I mean, they do kind of give some of the Slytherins some redemption with, I think particularly with the Malfoys, because as bad as they are, at the end of the day, they care about each other, their family. And I felt like
Right.
that was a good moment, you know?
Absolutely. Are you excited about Fantastic Beasts now turning into going from one movie into like a 5-series movie?
I actually am. You know, I'll admit to you that I avoided Fantastic Beasts at first. I was worried that I wouldn't like it. I was hearing, you know, pretty mixed reactions. And so I went in maybe with lowered expectations, and that's why I enjoyed it so much. But I watched it and I really liked it. It definitely it's a completely different tone because all the main characters are adults. So some of the complaints about, you know, missing the tone and I mean, it's Fantastic Beasts, but missing some of the more exciting magic in Harry Potter, I feel that it fits the environment that they're in. You know, it wasn't in a magical place. It's in New York, and so they're having to sort of, you know, hide it. And so, of course, you're not going to see as much. And then they're all adults, so the dynamic between them is really different. And also, I thought the main character, what was the main character's name?
Newt Scamander.
Okay, thank you. I really liked him because he was so different. I mean, Harry Potter is just, he is a really driven and proactive protagonist, and I kind of saw Newt as more laid back, more observant, and I liked that about him because he would really sort of let other characters speak and talk, and you could tell he's thinking and, you know, helping people learn and understand these beasts, but he's not as like pushy, he's not as driven, he's so different, and I thought that was a really interesting direction, you know. And I also liked the friendship that all the characters had at the end was really moving to me, and I was kind of surprised by that. I didn't expect it, and then when it happens in the end, the way they all kind of part and how close they all got, I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, I had the same reaction, almost word for word. Like I wasn't really interested in it. The trailers weren't doing anything for me. I wasn't really like digging on what they're putting out as far as like just the information. Went in with very low expectations, came out, you know, pretty happy. And I think I've grown, like as I've rewatched it a few more times, I've just grown with it. I love Newt especially like coming from my house, Hufflepuff. He's just like that. He's just such a wonderful representation of what characters from our house could be, because you don't get to see outside of Gryffindor and Slytherin and a little bit of Ravenclaw. You don't really get to see too many Hufflepuff characters in the Harry Potter series. So it's nice to see him as that representative for the house. Jacob and Queenie, I love them so much.
Yes.
And I'm really excited that they've, you know, decided to go with continuing the story, adding in some of the stuff that we as fans are ready to see, like young Albus Dumbledore and Grindelwald, and see how that shakes out in the coming years of these movies. And I'm so excited to see what they come up with next.
Yeah, and you know, I had actually some of my closest friends and family, they saw the movie and their reaction was that nothing happened. They were like, nothing happened in that movie. It just, you know, nothing at all. And I was like, but, you know, first of all, them saying that and then seeing it, to me, felt like a lot happened. Maybe because I was told nothing happened. But also, I thought that it was a lot more personality and character driven. I mean, Harry Potter already is character driven, but the journey that a lot of the characters take is more emotional and a little more grown up. And so I think, yeah, if you're expecting a big battle, I mean, you kind of get a battle, but it's more about the character's personal growth. And I actually usually like stories like that even more. So that's why I liked it.
Awesome. Well, we'll have to see what happens. I don't know when the next one comes out. I know they're filming it now.
Yeah.
So I'm behind on the times. I can't imagine next year, but if it's next year, I'll be happy.
Yeah, I feel like it's going to sneak up on me because I haven't been following it, and it's all of a sudden going to be out, and I'll just be pleasantly surprised.
Exactly. And I think that's what's been lately happening is they're like, oh, we've wrapped this movie. And I'm like, what do you mean you wrapped it? I thought you hadn't even started it yet. Like, I don't know. Like, there used to be so much, like, fanfare and, oh, this is in production and here's production. Like, sometimes it's like none of that happens at this point. But maybe it's just, I remember like the whole Lord of the Rings trilogy and all that stuff, 2 years of filming, and I'm like, okay, but now it's like 30 days, we're done with the movie.
Yeah.
Now, one of the fandoms that you're into is something that I've slowly started getting into, because I grew up on Marvel comics. So the only exposure for me for the DC comic side of things has always been their animated stuff, like the Batman animated TV show,
Sure.
or the DC animated movies that come out, or even now like Supergirl, Arrow, and The Flash on TV. But how did you get into DC Comics?
So I'm not too different from you in that my main exposure to it growing up was the movies, and I was mainly only a Batman fan. And I would say that when I was a kid, when the animated series came out, I loved it just like everybody else did at that time. And I loved the 1989 movie. I loved, I'm going to skip some of the Batman movies, but I liked the Nolan trilogy. I liked those movies, but I guess I liked it probably about as much as most people do. I wasn't really interested in comics in general. I mean, even though when I was younger, I actually worked at a comic shop, and I still was never, I was more into anime. To me, anime always gave me what I really wanted. But the past few years, it actually started because of cosplay, and I know we're going to talk about cosplay in a moment, but I wanted to cosplay a superhero, and I thought that I would cosplay a Marvel character. I mean, I just kind of assumed that that's what I would cosplay because I grew up really liking the X-Men, and I thought I'll just pick an X-Men, and then I'll be able to cosplay with my friends. And I'm one of those people that it's really hard for me to make a whole costume unless I really identify with the character and really feel a connection with them. And I tried. I could not find a character that I really connected with. And so I thought, well, I've always liked Batman. Why don't I try to read some Batman comics and just kind of see what happens? And that turned into a complete rabbit hole. I mean, it was like discovering a whole world that I didn't even know was there. And it's crazy. I mean, I'm like a different person now. Like, it's getting worse, not better. But I started reading Batman comics and just sort of got just so obsessed with it. And it definitely scratched that itch where I was talking about earlier about Harry Potter. I kind of went over to comics, and that gave me, it was like for the first time in a while, I had a big fandom where I could just buy all this merch and read all this stuff and watch all these shows. It's just super exciting to me. But it definitely started with Batman. I only read Batman at first. And then, of course, as you get deeper into the fandom, you start, I started reading more about Robin and some of the other side characters. And then I just started liking all of DC. And now here we are. I'm completely converted now.
Do you remember which Batman story it was that got you, or is it just like fuzzy as far as like, okay, it was something about Batman that pulled you into it as far as the comic series?
Oh, absolutely. So I think the Batman character in general has always been really exciting to me because there's a parallel there to some of the other things I like. For instance, always been like a big Sherlock Holmes fan. I love true crime, and so the fact that he's a detective and a crime fighter, it kind of brings the best of both worlds for me. But I enjoyed like The Dark Knight and I started with I think it's called Gotham Central, where it's really about Gotham PD. And so
yeah,
and it approaches it almost like NYPD Blue or something, and then Batman shows up every once in a while, but it's like, how do the police deal with these supervillains, and what does that do to how the public sees them, and how does Batman existing affect them? And that was kind of a gateway drug. And then what really tipped me over the edge after that was really the New 52 comics that Scott Snyder wrote, like starting with I think it's, let me look at the Court of Owls. I just want to make sure I was saying the right one. But I have all of those in hardback now, and I am obsessed with his storyline, the main Batman storyline. And I even got to meet Scott Snyder earlier this year here in Dallas, and he signed a couple of my books as well. I just became a fully converted fan. I think his take on the character and the depth that he brings to Batman and Bruce Wayne, and even to the other characters in his life, like Robin and some of the other characters, it just, that's what reeled me in for sure.
Awesome. Yeah, that Battle for the Cowl or Court of Owls.
Yeah, Court of Owls, yeah.
Court of Owls. That's one of the books that has been recommended to me because I've reached out to people that are like super into DC comics. I'm like, listen, I'm totally Marvel, but there's certain things that I'm interested in learning about the DC side of things. And for Batman, they were like, definitely that's one of those stories that you should probably pick up, because it's just so well done as far as just something that just gets you into Batman without having to go into like the 30 or 40 or 50 years of Batman.
Oh, for sure. And I was looking at the title because I wanted to make sure that's probably my favorite book he wrote, but I wanted to make sure it actually was the first one. But I mean, every big story arc, so the Court of Owls, Death of the Family, and then 0 Year and Endgame. I mean, they're all just, it's like one complete story. If you were unsatisfied with, like I was unsatisfied with the last Nolan movie, just the ending that Batman got, I thought it wasn't very fitting for that character, for him to just kind of ride off into the sunset and live an amazing life with Catwoman. I was like, what? I didn't appreciate that. I was like, no. And I think Scott Snyder's take on Batman and how somebody like Bruce Wayne would be, tortured and dangerous, and that's probably, no spoiler, not going to have a great end, that I think this gives you that ending. It's just very satisfying. Plus, his arc with the Joker, and my opinion, best take on the Riddler I've read. I just enjoyed all of it, and I've read it more than once. Can't recommend it enough. Definitely my favorite.
Now, is Batman your favorite character in the DC universe?
You know what? Forever he was. And now I have to say it's actually Robin. And when I say Robin, it's hard for me to choose a Robin. The four main ones are almost equal in my mind because they're just all so different. But, Dick Grayson, Jason Todd, Tim Drake, and I'm going to say it, Damian. They're probably my favorite, like, as a concept. I like Robin the most. And that only really came from reading the comics, though, because in my opinion, the movies, even the TV shows, they don't really portray Robin. He always kind of felt a little superfluous to me. Like, he's always getting rescued and he's a kid, and I didn't really understand the need for him, but I think the Scott Snyder run, and there's also a lot of other great comics out there, that really explain the dynamic between Batman and Robin and why Robin is so necessary. And I feel like a lot of fans start with really being obsessed with Batman, and then it almost seems like the more you read, you end up slowly coming over to the Robin side.
Yeah, I had talked to somebody previously, and their favorite DC person was Nightwing, which that's Dick Grayson.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, like, I know that you were talking about how Robin's portrayed in like the animated stuff, but I think the show that he shines in is like when he's in Teen Titans.
Yeah,
and,
I
like,
haven't seen a lot of Teen Titans. I didn't see I love him in Young Justice for sure. But yeah.
Yeah, I've not seen Young Justice, but with the Teen Titans, I feel like he gets to be that character that probably he is in the comics, but to like obviously a lesser extent with just an hour and a half movie. But he just feels more of a not just like shunted off to the side character. Yeah.
Oh, which movie was he referring to? Or
well, I know for Nightwing, like in the comics, there's a certain one that he had told me to look up. I can't remember what it was. It wasn't like any of the newer ones. It's one of the older Nightwing trade paperbacks. But like for me, I've watched like the Teen Titans like TV, like cartoon show, and then the Teen Titans. They've had a few like different Teen Titan animated movies come out, and I always seem to like feel like, okay, Nightwing's cool, or even like Damian is in a few of them, and it's like, okay, I get like he's a brat, but he's got some stuff going on too.
Yeah, he's complicated, and I think that's what's interesting to me about the Robins is on the surface they all seem to be pretty, two-dimensional, and then as you get to know the characters, they're complex. Dick Grayson just seems like a Boy Scout, but then as you get to know him more as a character, he's pretty complex. And same with Damien, he just seems like a brat. As you get to know him, that changes. I think it was Son of Batman, Bad Blood, and then I forgot what the last one was called, Batman and Robin, but that trilogy made me like Damien a lot more before I read him a lot in the comics. And I think the movie you might be thinking about is the Judas Contract.
Oh, maybe.
That one's new, but of the newer ones, that's a really good Teen Titan movie.
Yeah, that was a good one, because I did watch that one.
Yeah.
Now, outside of the Bat family, so to speak, do you have like a favorite non-Bat DC character?
So like can't be Gotham.
Yeah, like stay away from Bat people.
It's hard. I mean, I really like Wonder Woman.
Okay.
I've cosplayed Wonder Woman too, and I really love her and what she represents, and I absolutely loved the movie, and I've liked the way she's portrayed in the comics. So yeah, I guess Wonder Woman.
Okay. Mine is Starfire. Like of the DC characters that I know about, like Starfire is the one for me. And I don't know, like I like her in Teen Titans. I liked her. I picked up her last year. I think she had like a solo run for a year, and I was like, okay, yeah, I like her. She's living in Key West doing her thing. But yeah, I like her as a character.
I do too. I really do like Starfire. She's great. She's awesome.
One of the characters that I'm starting to get interested in, solely based on people on Twitter, is Poison Ivy, and how they want her to be a better represented character in comics, but apparently like they just keep defaulting her back to like evil villain.
Yeah, because I even feel that in the Batman animated series, I mean, she is a villain, but I don't know. Whenever there was an episode with her, I always felt like they first portray her as an activist, and then she just takes things too far, and that's why, Batman always kind of sympathizes with her a little bit. I mean, he sees the truth in some of what she's saying, kind of like with Catwoman, and I think those characters are strongest when they have a motivation that's relatable. So I would have to agree with that. I really like Poison Ivy, and I feel like you could really do a lot with that character in comics and in movies.
Oh, definitely. I know that they were pitching like, if Poison Ivy started her own Justice League, like who would she have with her on her team? So that was like fun to see, like, oh, here's some interesting characters that they would side her with. Because I know right now there's a comic series like Batgirl and the Birds of Prey, maybe.
Yeah.
And it's got like Poison Ivy and Harley and Catwoman and Wonder Woman, and like they're all like, it's all like an all-girl team up to go do something. And I was like, oh, that sounds pretty cool.
Yeah, and the Bombshells is a pretty good series too.
I'll have to check that one out. I've seen the Funko or the Rock Candy or whatever figures, but and then people cosplaying them, of course, but I didn't know that there's a comic about them.
Yeah, it's really interesting because it's kind of, around the time of, I think it's World War II, and it's kind of like, what if all the superheroes, the male ones, are off fighting a war, so they don't become who they're supposed to be, and so the women are left here, and they kind of become the heroes.
Ooh, that's interesting.
It's really well written too. Yeah, I've read some of it, and I really, really like it.
I'll have to check that out. I just keep adding more stuff to my list of things that I say I'm going to check out.
Same here.
Now, as we've mentioned throughout some of the recording, you are a cosplayer.
Yep. And
how did you get into doing cosplay?
I guess I probably have an answer similar to a lot of women my age. It's probably Sailor Moon that really got me into cosplay.
Yes.
I remember when I was around, I think probably around 12 or 13, was when they started showing it on TV. And I was so excited about it that I remember getting online and trying to learn more, like what were their Japanese names, and I feel like there's things being edited out here. I want to learn more, and that kind of just set me on the anime path. And I'm not trying to make a political statement or anything like that, but I will say that I gravitated towards anime when I was younger because there were just more female characters, and they tended to be the main character. They could be really sexy and cute and all that, but they got to be the front and center. And so I always gravitated towards that. And so when I started, really liking Sailor Moon and just loving that whole concept and that story, I, started out as a Halloween costume. Then I found out about conventions. Then I found out that, costumes aren't required, but if you really want to get the full experience, you would have one. And so I bought one online and I wore it, and I thought that was going to be a phase, but I guess it's not. It's still going.
What was your first official con costume?
I'm gonna go with Dirty Pair Flash was my first costume. Me and my best friend were Kay and Yuri. It was the original show was called Dirty Pair, but then there was a reboot in the 90s called Dirty Pair Flash.
Okay.
And I think that's because there was like a one-day con I went to in my Sailor Moon Halloween outfit, but I think my first real like cosplay experience was probably wearing that. It was just two girls like fighting crime, and it was in outer space, and it's such a fun show. I love it.
I've heard of it. I haven't ever seen it. I mean, I gravitated towards just certain anime back in my college years. I've been long out of anime, except for just a few things like on like that show up on Netflix from time to time. But yeah, I remember hearing about that one.
Yeah, and I mean, when I first started cosplay, I always tell people, I mean, I definitely bought them in the beginning, probably till I was around, I think maybe 19 or 20. It didn't even occur to me that I could make them. I mean, I think people forget, like, when you don't know about cosplay, you'd think I'm going to go buy it like I do on Halloween, right? So, I mean, I never pictured me sewing or creating anything, and as I started to go to more conventions, I noticed that other people made their costumes. And so that's when I started kind of transitioning to that. I feel like in the anime cosplay community, it's even more, almost everybody makes them, at least in America. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you and I follow very similar people, especially in the Texas community. And I just see them working away. Like, con crunch is coming up. I'm working on this, and here's the next outfit for the next con, and here's what we're going to do next year. And like I as someone, number one, who doesn't sew at all, I just can't imagine the amount of work that goes into it to come up with some of these costumes.
Well, and there's so many like resources now. I mean, when I started out, there weren't any. So when I think about the fact that I've been doing it, I think it's been like almost 17 years or something crazy like that. I should be like a master at it, and I'm not. But it's because, number one, I think as you get older, you have more money, but you don't have the same time that you did. And then also, people now can pick this hobby up in 1 year, and there's just so many resources, YouTube and all these tutorials, and you can become just really good at it very quickly. Whereas a long time ago, I mean, people weren't sharing secrets, and, it wasn't as, I guess we weren't as connected as we are today. I mean, we definitely had the internet, we had social media, but it's just changed so much now. And I think that's great. I think that's awesome. It's definitely helped me grow. And I'm kind of, like you said earlier, I kind of dropped out of the anime scene almost completely. I don't really watch a lot of anime anymore. So if it wasn't for the superhero stuff, I probably wouldn't cosplay as much as I do now. But yeah, I mean, all these resources help me, start making costumes that are so different from what I used to make. And it's just, I think it's really fun. But I would say no matter who you are, even if you've never picked up a sewing machine, I mean, there's just so much out there. There's so many people willing to help you and grow you. Like, I recommend it. It's really fun.
Now, one of the questions I always like to ask people who cosplay is for the character. Are you choosing the character based on your attachment to the character, or is it I want to do that costume and therefore I will be that character, or is it a mixture of both for you?
Honestly, I would say probably the vast majority of how I choose the characters if I like the character enough to cosplay them. And I think, like, more recently when I've chosen Batgirl, it's because I don't think I can be a convincing Batman. But Batgirl, I really grew attached to her from reading Gail Simone's take on that character, her comics with Batgirl, just the way she portrays Barbara and who she is, and just how smart she is, how driven she is, and just all her motivations are just so interesting to me that, you know, I used to kind of think of Batgirl and Supergirl as, like, you know, afterthoughts. They're just sidekicks, they're afterthoughts. They're just let's give the women a character, but they've really shaped those characters so well and made them so relatable and so different that I don't know. I just really, really connected with Barbara, and I really like who she is. And so that, I mean, if I didn't, I don't think I could have made the costume, basically. And I think if you look at most of the costumes I made, every once in a while there's an exception, but I have to really, really like the character and how they're written, how they're portrayed to cosplay it.
Now, which Batgirl costume is your favorite? Because you do a bunch of the different ones, and I'm curious to know which one you like the best.
Man, that's hard. I think the most fun to wear is the, like, 1960s Batgirl costume, because that's pretty much how she was created. I mean, they did add her to the show to kind of save it, and then it didn't save the show, but it created this character that people really, really liked, and she went on to have kind of a life of her own. And I think the costume itself is just very shiny and fun, and it's also very, like, I can move around easily in it, because not all my costumes are very mobile. So probably that one. And then the one that I made recently where I commissioned the cowl from Reeve Effects, which is awesome. It looks so good. I like that one because that's, like, getting me a little bit closer to being Batman almost, because I had, like, armor gauntlets, and I just really like how it looks. However, wearing a vinyl a vinyl suit in Atlanta when it's sunny outside and you're not feeling great. I mean, I don't know if there's a costume that I get more heat exhaustion in than that one. It's not really breathable. So I love how it looks. I get super excited to put it on, but I would say I can only wear it for a couple of hours. So I don't know. I like them for different reasons, but yeah, that's my long answer.
I get that. And I like that. I'm looking at your Instagram now with them, and I like, I guess, what, Dragon Con, you found a classic Catwoman and a Alfred?
Oh, yeah, that was actually at Fan Days this past weekend. Yeah, Elizabeth, I know her from my charity group that I'm in, and she asked me to wear that. Actually, on Sunday, I was going to wear Robin, and she asked me to wear Batgirl because she made that Catwoman costume. And then the guy playing Alfred, he's also in my group, and I met him as Alfred, and literally my husband ran and got me and said, "Oh my gosh, there's an Alfred here. I've never seen an Alfred cosplay. We have to go talk to him." And we've been friends ever since. And so, yeah, it finally worked out to where we literally all have that costume, and so we can cosplay together. But Michael and I, we actually met Adam West and Burt Ward earlier this year and got a picture with him right before he passed away. So,
oh, wow.
Yeah, it was back in March. We didn't know that he was sick. I had no idea, but we paid to have that picture with them. It's like me and Michael as Alfred, and Burt Ward and Adam West, and a Batmobile replica too. Like, it's a really
Sweet.
Cool picture.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was really, really fun.
Do you have any cosplays that you're working on for, like, later this year or next year, or costumes that you want to do or that are on your list? Because I know all cosplayers have a list.
I would say I do have a list, and I'm having a really hard time not just continuing to make more Batgirl costumes. Like, a part of me is like, I need to make something else. Like, I started a Sailor Mercury costume actually uh, with that group that you mentioned earlier with Cotier. But I kind of hit a snag. I ran into a part of the costume that I'm not happy with, and I'm trying to decide if I want to start over or, how I should proceed. And so I've kind of tabled it, which happens sometimes. Sometimes you'll work on a costume for a long time and then you're just not loving how it's turning out. And so you're like, I'm going to come back to this. And I may even wait a year or more. I think that I'll finish it because it's Sailor Mercury and I've made at least 2 Sailor Mercury costumes in the past. So I know I'm going to finish it. I'm just kind of tabling it for now. After Dragon Con and we focus so much on our costumes, I'm kind of taking a little break. So I haven't I've been really busy with the podcast stuff. And so I'm kind of waiting a little bit. I don't know for sure what my next costume will be. I feel like whatever I tell you, by the time we get to the end of, it's going to be different. Like, I'm going to change my mind 2 weeks before. So,
Totally understand.
yeah.
And speaking of your podcast is called I Love That Movie, and it's been active since March of this year. So by the time this episode comes out, your podcast will be in striking distance of hitting its 1-year anniversary.
Nice.
So exciting for that. How did you decide to start a podcast?
Well, I got really into podcasts the last couple of years. I listened to them a lot at work and on my commute, and I really like to listen to movie ones in particular because I think out of all the fandoms that I have, movies are kind of my first love. And I had tried to start a couple movie groups just with friends, like, let's all watch a movie and then meet up and discuss it. And I noticed that sometimes we were getting hurt feelings. People had really different opinions about movies and they can get really passionate about it. And it was also hard to sync up people's schedules. And I thought, how do I fix this? How do I make it to where, we're consistently discussing movies with people and it's never negative? I listened to some movie podcasts that I thought were a little too negative and were kind of draining to listen to. Like, I remember my husband saying, "Can you turn this off? It's just too much." And I decided, what if I made my own podcast and we only discussed what the guest loves? So they pick a movie that they love, that they've seen a million times, that they grew up with, and we just discuss that. And we not only discuss what the movie's about, who the director is and who the actors are, but we talk about their deep connection to the movie, because I realized that part of why people were getting into arguments and feeling so passionate is sometimes we have a connection to a movie that's outside of the movie. Like, maybe you watched it with your dad, or maybe you lost your job that year and you were depressed and this movie came out and it lifted you out of that. Mm-hmm. I think that movies we sometimes minimize. I think with all fandom, we kind of minimize it. You're too obsessed, it's too geeky, it's just a movie. But if we're honest with ourselves, I don't think it's just a movie. And I think that there are reasons why we feel so connected to it. And I kind of wanted to just give people a space to talk about that. And, it's what I'm interested in. I like talking about the movie, but sometimes I almost like hearing about that person and their connection to it even more, if that makes sense.
Oh, totally. It totally makes sense because, you, like, especially with me, like with my kids or whatever, it's like, I love X, Y, and Z movies or TV shows. I want you guys to love them because they meant so much to me growing up, or I have such an emotional connection with them. And then, of course, when they're like, "Oh, I don't like it," or whatever, it's like I don't get wounded by that. But there are times where there are movies where I feel very strongly about them. I'm like, I love this movie. How can you not love this movie? What do you mean? Like, I totally understand that. Like, I get it.
Yeah, and another exciting thing to me about it is, I think for a long time I was kind of a movie snob. I was really stuck in my opinions, and I have a lot of opinions, and they're strong. And I realized that if you're too opinionated, if you're too stuck, then you're not opening yourself up to everything that's out there. And one of the things I like about the podcast is sometimes my guest will pick a movie that I've never really wanted to see, or maybe I've watched it before and I didn't really love it that much, but I want them to change my mind. You know, I want them to explain to me why they love it so much, what they see in the movie. And, you know, I'm not going to call any specific movies out because I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings or anything like that. But there have been movies that they've changed my mind, like just listening to a fan tell me their take on it. It does change my mind. It makes me see that movie differently.
What movie have you done that has I guess maybe either changed your opinion of it, or one that you like maybe hadn't seen and you like of what you've released so far? Is there just one that stands out that's just like, this has like totally changed my whole opinion on the movie itself?
Yeah, I did an episode with Sarah Ragsdale. She's a voice actor for Funimation and somebody that I went to high school with. And I just hadn't connected with her in a long time, and I wanted her to be on because I know she has acting experience, and I thought that would be interesting to have somebody that's, you know, kind of in the industry talk about movies. And she picked Breakfast at Tiffany's, and I'd never seen it. And I kind of stay away from, I guess, romantic movies or romantic comedy type movies. And my view of that movie is just that it was that. And I saw it and I researched it, and I still kind of didn't know how I felt about it. But when I talked to Sarah and she started explaining to me her connection to these classic films and how, you know, she grew up watching the Turner Classic Movie Channel, and so she would learn way more about the movie than just watching it, because they would do a lot of behind the scenes and explain a lot of things. And everything that she learned about Audrey Hepburn specifically, I mean, it made me see her, Audrey Hepburn, completely differently. I mean, I think Sarah even said something like, a lot of people just, they have that Breakfast at Tiffany's poster on their wall and they don't know who she is and what she did and the impact that she had. And I mean, I'm listening to it, I'm thinking, yeah, that's exactly how I view it. You know, that, oh, this is a woman that, you know, you put on your wall when you're a teenage girl. I didn't know a lot about her. And so that definitely changed my mind. It made me see the movie differently. It made me want to watch more of Audrey Hepburn's movies too. And it definitely changed my mind.
Awesome. Yeah, I've never seen that movie. I worked at Blockbuster for years, but it's never been a movie that was like, I need to watch it at all, ever. But I mean, I think
you might listen to the episode first. maybe Sarah will talk you into it. maybe so. You've definitely covered a wide range of movies, and that's one of the cool things that I like about your podcast is you don't stick to sci-fi or you don't stick to action or comedy. Like you jump around from like things from like some of your first episodes, Dark City, Pulp Fiction, Marathon Man, but then you go down, it's like Back to the Future or Drop Dead Gorgeous, which is one, I remember that movie because I was working at Blockbuster at the time, and that was one of those movies where that caught me off guard with just how funny it was. Yes, I totally agree. It's kind of a forgotten gem. I mean, that episode almost didn't happen because I could not find that movie anywhere. I ended up having to like borrow it from a friend because if you were right now to get on Amazon and look it up, it's really expensive because I guess it's out of print.
Really?
Yeah. I thought, a lot of times I just go, oh, okay, I'm going to watch it on Saturday, then we'll record on Monday. And then I could not find it. And I was like, do I have to go to movie trading company? Like, what am I going to do? I cannot find this movie. And I ended up having to like borrow it from somebody. And I had to actually move the episode the first time because of that. I was like, I'm sorry, I couldn't watch it.
Wow, it's hard to believe because, I remember working at the Block, but, you get the copies and then eventually you sell them off. But yeah, that movie, there's a lot of those movies, I think, that came out probably in that like late 90s, early 2000s that really are, just forgotten gems of that nature where it's just such a fun or a good comedy. Like you invest like your hour and a half, hour 40 minutes into it, and that's about it. But yeah, like I still remember that movie.
Yeah, when he mentioned it, I thought, oh my gosh, yeah, this movie. Oh, of course, I'll just go look it up. There's another movie called Drop Dead Gorgeous that was made more recently, and that's everywhere, but you can't find this original one. There's no connection other than the title. But for some reason, yeah, it's interesting how sometimes movies like that will just sort of fade out of pop culture consciousness, but I wish that I wish they would re-release it.
That would be cool. Yeah, definitely. People out there in the internet lands that are listening, Drop Dead Gorgeous. If you can't find it, well, ask for it. Maybe someone can re-release it like on a Blu-ray or something.
Yes.
What's been your favorite movie to talk about of the ones that you've had come out of your episodes?
Ooh, that's so tough. I mean, it's kind of like when you ask somebody what their favorite movies are, there's just so many. I guess more recently, I was really, really excited that one of my guests picked Perfect Blue, which is an animated movie that I'm really obsessed with. It was probably one of the first anime movies I saw, and I just really, really like it. And it's one of those movies that I've always tried to get people to watch, even if they don't like anime, because it's so good. Have you ever seen it?
I don't believe so. I'm actually trying to look it up right now just to make sure.
Yeah, the director is Satoshi Kon. He made Millennium Actress, Paprika, that show Paranoia Agent. Usually his movies are very psychological and surreal. And this movie in particular, it's very similar to Black Swan, if you've seen that movie.
I have. I've seen that one.
Okay. Except this movie came out, I think it was 1998.
Yep.
Or 97. Yeah.
97, 98.
Yeah. And actually, Darren Aronofsky, who directed Black Swan, he actually bought some scenes from Perfect Blue to use in Requiem for a Dream. So he actually owns the rights to this movie. And if you see this movie, it's very similar to a lot of Aronofsky's movies. I mean, you can definitely see that there's a connection there. And some of his other movies, like Paprika, remind me a lot of Inception, and just so they kind of have that reality bending, surreal quality to them, and they were just so forward thinking. Way before we were watching movies like that were live action, probably because they weren't as possible, but as they are now with special effects. But that's one of my favorite movies ever. I feel like it's very similar to Black Swan, but I actually think it's a little bit better. And it's only about 90 minutes. I will warn you, it's very graphic. It's pretty violent. It can be kind of a rough watch, but if you like psychological thrillers, you'll really like it.
Yeah, I just read the Wikipedia for it. It sounds, again, like you said, very much similar to Black Swan, but a little bit probably more graphic and intense. But yeah. I don't think I watched it. And that was like the time period, 97, like late 90s and early 2000s, where I was really watching a lot of anime. Like I watched like Millennium Actress and a few other like of those main like non-studio Ghibli movies, because of course I watched those.
Oh yeah, of course, those are classics.
But like Millennium Actress, there's a few other like releases that came out that were very much, just purely anime, but getting those like more featured on like, oh, Blockbuster's actually picking them up and renting them and stuff. And but I think I've heard of it, but I don't believe I ever saw it, because I think I'd remember that one.
Yeah, I mean, Millennium Actress kind of it plays with a similar theme that movie plays with, except that it's not dark, it's not a thriller. There's no horror aspect or mystery to it, but it's still kind of reality bending and playing with time and space. But yeah, if you're interested in that movie, you definitely should watch that one. And we kind of talked about it, like I think we talked about it for like 2.5 hours, and the movie's only like 80 minutes or something. So we both happen to really like it. My guest, he has his own podcast where he talks mainly about horror or independent films, and he's a big slasher horror fan, which I'm not as much, but he is, and so he really likes that movie because it has that element. It's sort of slasher, it's sort of horror, but then it's also psychological. It kind of combines some genres, and so he just had a lot of thoughts on it. He also was living in Japan for the past year, so he had kind of a different perspective on it because of that too. So that was really fun to just get to like discuss everything about it. That was good episode.
Are there movies that you're hoping your guest like picks? Is there like a few that you're like secretly like, I really hope they pick this movie because I'd love to talk about it?
Oh yeah. And there's been some that we've talked about already, like Blade Runner was a big one that I could not wait to discuss. But I have a kind of a mini episode I did a few months ago because I just didn't have the time to do an entire episode. And I think it's just like my top 25 movies, which that's so hard to pick. I mean, right after I recorded it, I thought of several that I left out, but pretty much anything on there is like one of my top movies that I want to talk about for sure.
Awesome. Yeah, it's I always got it like working at a Blockbuster and afterwards, because I worked there for such a long period of time, like 4 or 5 years, and you get free rentals. Like that was the thing about Blockbuster for people that have no idea what I'm talking about. Blockbuster was, you'd get to rent movies at a store, and that would be like the big thing that people would do on the weekends is go there to rent movies. And like we'd get 7 free rentals a week. And it's like, okay, well, 7 movies a week, I would try to watch at least like 4 or 5 times, 52 weeks. And then times 4 years, like I watched a lot of movies. And just picking like favorites, it's like, okay, you asked me for favorite movies. You're going to have to narrow it down, like favorite comedy movies or favorite drama movies. Like I can't just give you a favorite movie.
Right. Yeah. I know. I feel the exact same way. I never worked at Blockbuster, but I used to work at Suncoast. Do you remember Suncoast?
Yes, I do. Yes.
Yeah. And I did that basically to feed the anime habit. That's where you got them because, you couldn't find them anywhere else. And of course, like every disc or VHS tape was like $30. It was so expensive. And that's why there was such a big market for, unlicensed stuff because it was hard to come by. But yeah, I worked there to buy movies and to buy anime. So
absolutely, that was one of the things. After a certain point, like I got to be in the position where I could go through the catalog and be like, well, let's fill out like some of our sections. Like we don't have enough Westerns. So I'd order like a few Westerns to please like the people that wanted Westerns. But at the same time, be like, hey, look, there's some anime that's out there. And, people are digging this Pokemon thing and this Yu-Gi-Oh! I could totally, we could make that investment and get a few of these other anime. Maybe people will like them. And that was how I got to watch some of the like anime, was just because I had the store order it.
Yeah, I first saw a lot of anime through our local video stores. There was a place called Video Update, and of course we had Blockbuster too, and sometimes you could even rent movies at the grocery store. And they would have like a little video section. But I would go to the international section. This is before they even had, anime section.
Yep.
And I would just kind of pick stuff and probably saw stuff I shouldn't be watching, frankly. But my parents didn't really think to police it or look at what I was watching because it was a cartoon.
Right.
But yeah, I saw a lot that way.
Now, for those people who are listening to this podcast and they want to find your podcast or to follow you on Instagram or Twitter or cosplay pictures or whatnot, where can they find you?
Okay, so on Instagram, and it's kind of long, it's Ayanami Lisa. It's AYA, N as in Nancy, AMI Lisa. That's Insta. And then on Twitter, it's AYA Lisa Cosplay. And then my podcast, currently I'm on iTunes, Stitcher, and Podbean. If you just search I Love That Movie, my episodes will come up.
Awesome. And so I will have the links to that on the show notes and the website and our Facebook page, so that way people can find you. And hopefully people will check out your podcast and definitely give it some listens and feedback, or follow you on Instagram because you have some awesome cosplay pictures on there. And of course, it's not only cosplay pictures, but it's like your life pictures as well, adventuring around and doing your real life thing as well.
Yes.
Awesome. So I guess that's it, Lisa, but it has been a pleasure.
Well, thank you so much for asking me. I really, really do appreciate it. It's so fun to get to talk about, some of the fandoms I don't really get to discuss on my podcast. Like, I don't really talk about cosplay a whole lot, or comics, or Harry Potter. So that was just really fun to discuss that. And I've enjoyed listening to your podcast as well. So I just really appreciate it.
It has been my pleasure, and hopefully we can circle back and do something again.
Yep, I'm going to ruminate on that Slytherin question. I'm going to dive deep and figure out why I'm Slytherin between now and the next time.
Awesome. I'll make sure to make a note and bring it back up.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Tales from the Fandom. Subscribe to us on iTunes or your podcast app of choice. Follow us on Facebook at www.facebook.com/Tales from the Fandom to see photos, links, leave feedback, and check out upcoming guests. If you'd like to be a guest, email David at talesfromthefandom@gmail.com.